This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Welman.
Welcome back, Harry. It's time to do our promised New Year's Eve Lekker Rugby Pod, literally the last one for 2024. So thanks and welcome back.
How's it, MV? One of the secrets to my success as a fixer is that I don't use the word wish and I don't use the word hope. I found that those two things really hurt my ability to fix problems and make scandals go away and change the end of a story, because if the longer I'm sitting there and hoping, then the less I'm doing, and the more I'm wishing, it's like a regret. However, I do think this season, at the end of the year, is the perfect time for me to break my rule and wish away and just wish all the happy thoughts I can possibly wish, because it's a positivity moment.
The nice thing about there's no scandal to fix here. We had a fantastic year, mostly. So it's not a bad thing to have a wish list. Things can only get better going, and well, maybe not. But the point is that there's no scandal to fix. So we're going to talk about a couple of things here in terms of your wish list, and starting with the teams. And let's start with the alpha team. Let's call it that. Let's call them what they are. The Springboks. What would your wish list for the Springboks be the next year?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So as much as I like the 51, 52 player thing, whatever we're doing, as much as I like the new blood, there's a part of me that kind of hopes and wishes that we kind of hone it in and we kind of see the heir apparent of, at 12 and 8 and whatever Sia is going to do next. There's a part of me that wonders, is Sia going to be moving to 8? And does that shuffle the deck? But there's two players in particular, and indulge me a little bit. I just want to see them play. I want to see Evan Ruiz with all of his power and puff and craziness. He's like a bull snorting sometimes, the way he's waiting for the next carry. I want to see Ruiz get an extended run, not only because it will give guys like Gasper Visa a break, but because I don't think a hard carrier, a big physical carrier, is much of a drop off from a hard carrying number 8. It's not like Visa doesn't bring offloads, or he's not like linking that much. He's just a guy who will run down a barrel for you. So I kind of want to see what that looks like, because we do know what Elrich Lowe looks like, and we do know what Ben Jason Dixon running around with his head chopped off looks like. We have some reads, but I still haven't really seen him do that, Ruiz. And then Sasha Feinberg, Ngomazulu. I want to see what the ceiling is there. I keep thinking that we are looking at someone who's a rare talent. Cameron Honeycomb is the same. So you could put all these 3 guys in a barrel. I want to see what that extended looks like. Give them 7, 8, 9 tests to run around and see what it looks like. I don't think this is too much of a wish. I just want to stay number 1. Whatever it takes on the world rankings, however stupid they are, arbitrary, however much we think a thing like the Harry Index is sort of arbitrary and the World Rugby one is too, I don't care. I just want the box to stay number 1. I want to start number 1 and finish number 1. If there's something in the middle that causes us to go number 2, fine. But get back to number 1, because I think that's cool.
So what would it take for us to stay number 1? Win the Rugby Championship, beat Italy, beat Georgia, beat all those little minnows coming in the incoming tour. End of year tour, that's a big one. Ireland is going to be included in there. It's not going to be that difficult to stay number 1, is it?
No. So the way it works, though, none of those July things will help us. But we have a margin set up. The Six Nations could help us, because if Ireland stumbles a little bit and loses, which is very possible, then that makes the margin bigger before we even start. And then the Rugby Championship's always going to be the big one, because we have to play New Zealand ranked below us in New Zealand at their fortress. So that would be one where we could lose a 2-point. And then, like you say, ending up strong. I'm not as worried about ending up strong anymore. I think we changed the way we think. And I think the Boks are geared differently, and they can finish strong. But I think that Rugby Championship, 2 games in New Zealand, a resurgent New Zealand All Blacks are no one's fools. I mean, we can focus on Steve Hansen being a bit of a tonsil, getting on there talking about being robbed. But the fact is, they're smart guys in New Zealand are really they're working, and they hate the idea that it's 4 in a row. They hate that. And so I think proper match to look at next year, the one we're all looking forward to. I've got to find a way as a rugby gypsy to get there, is in Auckland Rugby Championship. If there was going to be a ding, that would be there. And then obviously, anytime you lose at home, it really hurts you. So the loss in Durban really hurt us on the way the world rankings constructs its rankings. And so, yeah, I mean, we broke arms and legs, at some point with a walking wounded. It was like a hospital ward playing against a rugby team. We were on crutches, but there's no excuses. World Rugby, the rankings are actually pretty solid. You look at the rankings right now and you look at them and the gaps, it's about right. There's 4 top teams in the world. We're the top, but that foursome is really defined. And then the next group of 5 to 8 is really another clump, and then everyone else.
Yeah, that Eden Park game. That's the first time we're going to beat them since 1937. If I remember off the head of top of my head correctly. Wouldn't that be a humdinger? Top of my wish list, I would say. And also, I would say I wish that we beat Ireland in Ireland end of the year. For a lot of reasons. We spoke about it the other day. We can claim back Zombie/Rassie, number one, and it's going to put them away. But I think Ireland's going to be a little bit vulnerable this year. Yeah, and if Harold not being there, caretaker coach in the meantime, maybe a more permanent coach, we never know. And the All Blacks, I think you mentioned earlier that Scott Robinson took a long time to get into the swing of things with Test rugby, but I think he's there now. So yeah, that's going to be interesting.
When New Zealand plays its best and they're cooking all cylinders, they can hurt you. And you could imagine the All Blacks beating us by a score in Auckland if everything goes right for Will Jordan is cooking and backline's humming. It's not that true of Ireland. Ireland would squeak one by us or not, but we know how to beat them. If the Boks play the way they're supposed to play, we will beat Ireland in Ireland, just like New Zealand beat Ireland in Ireland, because they're the way to muck up their spokes in the bicycle that they try to ride. Everything has to go perfectly. They're the most high intensive, difficult rugby that they play. The Irish are putting together this elaborate like a symphony orchestra, and it has to all go right. All Blacks can play proper brutal rugby. They got a great scrum. They have power runners, and they kick the ball a lot, and they know how to keep you out of their 22. So I just think they haven't played their best rugby in a while. I think I saw glimmers. I saw when I was in Dublin, I thought, ooh, yeah, next year is going to be proper. But you can hang the whole season, the wish list of next year, you can hang the whole season on those 2 matches, basically. Say, beat Ireland in Dublin and beat New Zealand in Auckland, and everything else should take care of itself.
Rassie mentioned that he's going to start whittling down this 52 player group that he's used this year. Do you think it's too early, going into 2027? Should 2025 be the year where teams sort of settled and then they just go, storming into 2027? Or is it going to take another year, a bit more experimentation and the likes?
No, I think it should start. I think incrementally. You don't get to do very much in 2027. Whatever you have, you have. There might be a bolter, but bolters are almost obsolete nowadays. So whatever you need to have set, you'd have to have set by the end of 2026. And so I think 2025 is like, if you take these 4 years and compare them to a golf tournament, you want to make the cut. So I think, you're going to, by the end of next season, you should have said, Marco van Staden, yes, you're in my second rung or not. Ruiz, you're in or not. Elrich Lowe, you're my key utility forward. You're like Francois Lowe. Like those things I think need to be crystallized, because you're not only going to be choosing quality, you're also choosing game plans around these players. You construct a different gameplay with Sasha if he's going to turn into a 12 or a 15 versus a 10. So I think there's some clarity around that. I do think we've talked about this a little bit. At 9, no need for clarity. I think it's like blessed by riches. It's okay, just different styles, and you need to play different styles. 15, I saw someone saying that Fassie's been anointed as starting 15. I don't think so. I think Willemse, Fassie, and Sasha could all play at that position. I think Billy, probably that's clear, that whiny LaRue, who's whining too much, is at the back of that pecking order now. He doesn't look like he wants those high balls anymore, which is understandable. Look, I'm not bashing the guy. It's a lot of times to rise in the air, get a concussion, get knocked out. But he doesn't. He looks like he's preserving himself now instead of going for it.
Right, the other teams that we always talk about, let's talk about the 4 local franchises. Now, I first start with the little sort of stepchild, the Lions. What would your wish list for the Lions include for 2025?
I just want the baby lions to keep scampering. They're cute. They're like lion cubs. They just all fall over each other. The little lion cub is chewing on the dad's ear. And then at some point he gets swatted by a big paw, the big paw of the Bulls or the Stormers. They are such a fun team to watch. They score more than half of their tries from their own half. Like, that's unbelievable. 53% of their tries originate in their own half. That's 25% more than any other team in World Rugby. So they live off the kick return, the fractured defenses. So they're fun. But I just think they're going to do that. They don't have any recognized full-blown, quintessential box. They don't have any those people to hang around. I don't think Cash sometimes puts them even in the right spot to win. But they're such a tough team. And, they are the example of just having to play with a deficient payroll, not enough resources, but they're always going to be mid-table or better. They're hard to beat. So I think my wish list is they continue on, but I don't want them to cannibalize the fortunes of the big three.
Would your wish list for the Lions include a new coach?
We're going to think my solution to everything is tossing out a coach. I don't think that, actually. I think in the Lions case, I actually think they need to fix their finances more than anything else before they start spending money, cashing out this coach, cashing out cash. No, I don't think he can take them to the promised land. So maybe that's the long-term solution. But for now, I think, I talked to a guy at Harlequins at the actual stands, and this is a South African guy who lives in London and follows the Quins very closely, and he has a lot of inside information. And he said what the Quins do is they hope to be a middle table team every year. They literally like to get 50% results, and then once every 5 or 6 years they spike, go far in Europe or do something in the Premiership. But they keep their 14,000 seat stadium full. They are balanced on the books, and the owners use it as like a cool side portfolio. I think I'm not knocking teams that manage to stay forever mid-table, because that is a viable professional club goal. And pay attention not so much to that they don't win, and pay attention to, but they never go to the bottom. And so they're never rebuilding. I think the Lions probably would be a pretty good story if they were always 8th, 9th, 7th in the ERC, and every now and then, the magic hits and they're in the top 4 and vie for the title.
Yeah, well, I think a minimum for me as a wish list for them would be to be in the top 8, qualify for the knockouts in the URC.
Yeah,
I think that's a given. Now it's a bit of a toss-up we to talk about next, because we're starting from the back. It's going to be the Stormers, the Sharks, or the Bulls. I mean, it can't be a toss-up because there's 3 of them. So I'm just going to go randomly just to irritate you a little bit and talk about the Stormers.
My wish list for the Stormers is that we believe again in structure, that we believe that there's a plan, that the universe has an order, that there is a consequence to actions, that when you try to thread a cross kick in between the poles behind your own line and put a googly on it and maybe put some backspin, and you think it's going to land in someone and they're going to streak away for a 100-meter try, that you go, maybe I won't do that. Maybe I'll just take one step and hoof it. You're the best lineout in the whole comp. Why don't we trust it? Why don't we kick the ball not only out, but actually into the stands? Like, hit the guy who's drinking the beer, the big fat guy. Hit that guy, and then trudge to the lineout and steal one or take our own. We have the most penalty generating scrum, but you wouldn't know it because we don't even keep the ball in the scrum long enough to harvest it and force the card. I know that refs don't want to call penalties anymore in cards, but let's believe in ourselves. Let's believe in what has always been the case, is that nobody comes to Cape Town and scrums us. Nobody, not even your Bulls. And we are the hardest place to win for a visitor for a reason in the Super Rugby. because you couldn't beat our set pieces. Now, we're always going to have all that flash in the back, but it's of no use if we're using it to do a circus trick. If we're just doing somersaults and doing leapfrogs and people are kicking each other in the shorts, I don't know what we're doing back there, but it looks like everyone is drunk. And also, like, there's no accountability for it. So do I think the Stormers could hatch a miracle here? Absolutely. Miracles happen all the time on Table Mountain. Up there, you know, there's an old Dutchman smoking with the devil, and who knows what's going to happen. But there's going to be a renaissance. I believe in it. I believe the Stormers will blow again, and they will make life miserable for other teams down the stretch. I don't know with mathematics if this is going to work. Do the maths work for us to get to top of the erg? Probably not. But in a knockout match, I mean, we can spoil someone's season, which could be fun. It could be you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. No, Cloud Cuckoo Land's a nice place to be, but anyway. Okay. Right, let's talk about the Bulls. My feeling about the Bulls before you start is just the Bulls are one click away from clicking. And I said, and it sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's true. They are such a formidable team. Jake admitted himself this weekend he's not exactly sure what's going on. Maybe he's missing something. He said it in his own words. I'm quoting him just to clarify everything. But at the same time, they can just as well go the other way now. So I just wish that things will click for the guys from Pretoria. I just think they deserve it. 2 out of 3 finals. Just get it over the line this time. As close enough. Get it over the line. End of discussion. Non-negotiable.
Well, okay. So the Bulls need a red zone spark. Something's got to spark the red zone. It's almost like everything is light blue everywhere. You need that little red part of the Bulls uniform to kick in. That can become a habit. You can say, like we've talked about, how football has a stat, which is shots on goal. And let's refine that. Let's leaven it with shots in anger, so a proper velocity shot on goal. You just build enough of those, enough will go in because goalkeepers won't get all of them and you win. I think that's almost what they've built at the Bulls, this mentality of like, well, our KPI is strong. We had a lot of entries, but that's not how rugby is played. Mm-hmm. That is fool's gold. That is like the number of entries allowed by the box in the World Cup. It didn't matter because in the red zone, the box did not let anyone score tries. And so you can stiffen up. You have more freedom. You can blitz more. You can collect man and ball. If you have a penalty against you, you can keep committing penalties forever. In fact, if the minute someone does a penalty, just tell the guys around you, keep infringing because they're not going to really card us in the first 10, 15 minutes. So a lot of the Bulls stats are built on that mirage. And what they've been lacking is the incisive, decisive, diagonal line, inside line, that Franco Mostert line that, where was it? It was against England, where you go, boom, there you go, at pace.
Wales.
Wales. And it was unstoppable. Who's going to stop that? No, I think there's something that's lacking on the, we always swear the money ball, but not just the money ball, but the money line, the line you take on these carries. I feel like a lot of Bulls are making the gain line, getting over the gain line, being tackled, and then there's a restart, and I don't really see enough where you're constructing a play where Honeycomb's getting free, running amok, getting behind the line. So if I was going to the drawing board with the Bulls and having a wish list, it would just be that, some set plays, some starter plays off lineouts that don't just involve a maul that either goes or stopped, but starter plays like we saw from the box, tap and goes, third phase, fourth phase plays where you're holding something back and you have your best carrier on phase 5 or 6 instead of your best carrier always on 1 or 2 when the defenses are harder to break.
Something you mentioned the other day was, that lineouts, for example, the throw, the catch, the pass to the scrum half, and then the pass to the back line. To the Bulls always seem to be, to me, a millisecond off on each one of those things, and it adds up. Especially the pass from the lineout jumper to the scrum half. He's always catching the ball at his feet or something like that, immediately. And then when he passes, he either passes high or whatever, and everything gets slowed down. Like, is that what you're talking about?
It's so exactly right. So I've been watching the Bulls closer this year because of you. And the one thing that does my head in is the lack of quality of the ball from the catcher to the 9 at lineouts. It is horrendous. It is more often at his feet for some reason. You're right. And then that makes the 9 go high. So it's almost like you're giving a low feed and a high pass to the back line.
Exactly.
And it is so destructive for a guy like Willie, who's an artist, because he needs that extra second. I mean, that second is gold. If you give him no seconds, he's just like everyone else. He's going to be terrible. He's going to get charged down on a cross kick. You need that extra second of vision. And the moments where you saw Willie have that second, he produced. Some of the great Bulls tries of the season have been from that extra golden second. And it accumulates, like you said, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, boom, there you have a second lost. You give a rush defense, you give, let's just take Glasgow, because they have a good midfield. You give them an extra second to smash you, you're done. You cannot make the third receiver. You're just going to get from 9 to 10, and you might squeeze one out to 12. But you never get to 13, and you never get to your flyers.
And the point about that is it's not about the lineouts. It's not about the scrummaging. It's not about whatever. It's about basic skills. How to pass the ball, how not to pass the ball so hard that the scrum half has to actually stop and catch it. If you know where I'm going, they just sort of torpedo
it's soft
the
hands.
Ball. Soft hands.
Yeah, you got soft
That's
hands.
skills.
You know, I heard the story, and I think it's true. It's been witnessed by people in Toulouse that Antoine Dupont's obsessed with this issue, which is the quality of the ball from 4 meters up in the sky down to little Dupont, right? So it's really important for him to not have to wonder where the ball is going to be. He almost wants to be able to look at Intermac, and he knows the ball is going to come softly. And so he stopped practice, and he became the lock. And he made the lock become the scrum off, whoever he was yelling at, whoever the line-out jumper was. I think it's probably a loose forward there. But he made that guy be the 9. And then he did 30 minutes of lineouts and said, now look at this shit. Look what I'm giving you.
You deal with this.
And now look how much easier it is if I give you this beautiful, soft, 70% speed, easy to catch ball, no spiral, no flip, just a flat ball, a ball falling into your hands. Yeah.
Yes, that's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the Sharks. I mean, there's a lot of talk about CR maybe returning to the Stormers, and we talked about, earlier on about the Sharks not being the same team without Eben being there and without Bongi being there. What do the Sharks wish list look like for the year?
I think South Africa is, best off with 4 strong teams, obviously. And but what you really don't want to do is put your hopes and faith in club success, given that the Bok model right now is so global. But to the extent there is one team in South Africa that you would think, oh, I really need them to do well, it would be the Sharks, because they have so many Boks that you're going to hurt their confidence if they get beaten too much. Not a guy like Eben, because I think Eben can play outside his own mind almost at this point. I mean, he can lose a game with the Sharks, play terribly, and in the Boks, he's the world class. So, but at the team sheet let's look at it. I mean, it's really, when you are some team in Wales or you're in Scotland and you see that team sheet rock up, you're like, whoa, wish you get pounded, and then they don't. So I suppose the Sharks have to look at their own team sheet and they have to see who they are. My wish is that they will know who they are and they will do that. I actually think, and our friend Johan might disagree, but I think that win over the Bulls was probably good for them, in the sense that even though it was a really scrappy, like all derbies are, and nothing is really, like no one feels happy at the end. It's like a civil war or something. You're battling your own brothers. I do think it was an important win. I think internally the Sharks will go away from that thinking we did what we have to do, and we can do that. If we can beat the Bulls, who's a proper strong team, we weren't at our best, and our scrum was, terrible. They can look at that and say, yeah, but if we have Bongi and Eben coming back, we'd be starchy. I think it's belief. Sharks is belief. Stormers is a brain, and a Bulls, I think, is more magic. I think the Bulls are relying too much on, if we do this, then this will happen, like inevitably. And no, you could, in rugby, whatever the equivalent in rugby of allowing 20 shots on goal and thinking like, then you're going to lose. No, you don't have to. In rugby, you can hang on. Remember, I mean, I'll just take an example, which will make all of us sad. The quarterfinal in 2011 World Cup against Australia. I mean, look at the stat sheet. It didn't matter because of the jackal, because of the snaffle, because of the Skalkberger knock-on, because of Farid Dupree not scoring over the line. You know, you have to still score. Like in the end, we don't give you sevens in rugby. In sevens, we give you sevens. But in proper rugby, nothing is on a platter. So I think the Sharks probably have a lot of upside this season if they can get their belief structure and stay healthy. By the way, in all these teams, the health is such a big issue. It's such an attritional match in derbies. You know, I'm looking at this Stormers Sharks coming up. I'm like, oh no, how many people we lose?
Just you said they have to know who they are, and I think that might be part of the problem. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Springboks are the Springboks. The Shark Springboks are not the Sharks, nor the Springboks. It's
Yeah.
neither fish nor fowl. They need to play the same kind of game that the Springboks are playing, because now they're trying to play two different games at two different times of the season. Isn't that part of the problem?
I think so. I think the brothers Hendricks at 9-10 can give you a proper test rugby kind of approach. With Fussy, the other game manager, then you could really take the Bok mentality. For a long time, people have been upset with me on this channel where I don't sing the praises of Andre Estes, and it's just because I don't think that he keeps the ball alive enough in a quick enough manner. It's not like playing the Premiership where you can just smash everyone physical in South Africa. So you're not going to run over, anybody really. There's no team to run over. So I think in a way, someone a little more of a ball player to set Hooker more free and some of the other flyers. So that would be the difference. I think Damien Delende is a lot better than people give him credit for. So I think that's a stopper in the system. It blocks it a little bit, but the pack there's no pack in club rugby that should be able to push around the Sharks. So that's the gift that keeps on giving.
Acceptables.
I do think that a lot of this is mentality. And we talked a lot about how, why could the same players play this way and the very same players play a different way under a different coach? And the truth is that coaches are instrumental. Players go to clubs because of coaches. More than going to a city or a club and the jersey and whatever. Take away the idea of where you came from, which is always attractive to go back to. But if you just were looking at a club and you go, oh, Robbie Deans is coaching somewhere in Japan. Love that guy. Under him, I had my best years. You might go there. Or you might see Franco Smith and say, yeah, I like the way he carries himself, how he talks about his players. I want to go play with him. And so, I think the Sharks could do a lot better. But again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm always changing coaches as the remedy. I think sometimes also it's players, senior players, who can almost coach a team as well. Like you could imagine Bongi, Ibn, and Sia Kolisi forming a triumvirate where you just said, hey guys, this is what we're going to do, and put them on their backs. And on that, by the way, there's been some, I thought, ugly talk this week about Sia potentially going back to, where his kids live and so forth. I would just remind all of us, or remind myself, to remember that we don't know full stories behind anything. We also don't know what people are doing to get better. We don't know what people are trying to do behind the scenes. We really don't know. And if you think that people that are so-called scandal-free, it means they didn't do anything wrong, they might just be better at being bad, or they might have a guy like me on their side who could make things washed. So speak honestly, walk softly, be gracious. If you haven't been in a situation like this, you might at some point, you don't know. So, I think, let's just keep our rugby players as rugby players, absent some, like I said, criminal crime, some crime adjudicated, fine. I've bashed Stuart Hogg and he deserves it. But family stuff. Let's not talk about it so
Yeah,
much.
no, we don't know enough. I agree with you. But you mentioned something other than the players that has got a profound impact on the game, and that I thought about that when you talked about the 2011 game against Australia in the World Cup, and the referee played an outsized role there. We don't bash referees here, but there's a lot of debate about the quality of the refereeing lately, especially in South Africa, where there seems to be a bit of a growing gulf. We always used to have test quality referees, but nowadays not so much anymore. What's happening with referees across the world, and then mostly in South Africa? What's the wish list there?
I'll take a page out of Jake White's book now and say I don't know. Jake said I don't know why he's losing, why they're not scoring one of the signal results. I don't know why there's a dip, from the days of Craig Jobert and Jonathan Kaplan and these guys, and why we're not producing that. And I was wondering, maybe it's a theory, guys, so it's a hypothesis. It's based on nothing, except I noticed that coaching level inside country compared to some of the coaching that's outside, like Nina Aber or Franco Smith, or actually there's a lot of examples, actually. It's kind of sad. Abroad, I don't know if maybe what stays behind sometimes is more conservative. And when I say this conservative, I don't mean that they, like, John Dobson's like a conservative guy, but he stays with what he knows. He thinks that something works. I got to the York final, I won, so therefore I got, and so as you get older, you get stuck with your same paradigms. And I think the same thing that is making coaching really astute and go forward is sort of related to referees. So the places that seem to be generating a lot of good, solid, smart coaching is also generating good referees. There's also a cultural thing in that, you feel like you want to be a good player. So to be a referee, you kind of giving up. And so you really need to have a heart of a referee. I've talked to on pods and in over coffee and just related. Jonathan Kaplan. I've talked to Angus Gardner from Australia at length. And they wanted to be referees from early days. For them, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a great player. Like, they had no illusions about that. They knew they were not going to be a good player. And some of the referees that are the best weren't even players at all. I mean, they were just barely players. So it's a different mentality, and rugby is such a complicated game. I actually think on the referees, we're all over the place in rugby. We don't know. We say what we want, but we don't seem to be doing it the right way. I'll give you an example. In every other major sport, tennis, American football, basketball, to some extent, football, soccer, you don't really know the referees. The referees are not famous at all. They are just a guy, dressed in a referee thing. We haven't got big theories. We don't decide before the match we're going to get screwed. We don't go, aha, see, he's screwing us again. In other sports, we get mad at the calls, but the referees themselves are not targets because they're not really that famous. They are not known by first names, whereas all of our referees that are good in rugby, we know them by their first name. I just say a first name, you know who it is. Boom, boom. Nigel, boom. Gus, boom. And Nick. So I've thought about this, and I think Kaplan told me a good thing. He said, back in the Currie Cup and Varsity Cup, we used to do real-time referee face the press, like 10 minutes post-whistle. And all the big calls that were made, you defended them, you stated your case, you elocuted them. It doesn't matter if you agree with it. They would say what they saw. Number one, you got to sense how hard those calls are. So Craig Jobert facing up post Scotland, Australia, which ruined his career. If he could just have stood right there, right then, and explain what he saw about a knock-on or not knock-on, it helps the 90% of fair public that go, okay, I don't like it, but I know you weren't trying to screw me. You just saw what you saw. Number two, sometimes it's interesting because the referees are both famous and muzzled. Like, you're a big person, but you're not allowed to talk about it. It actually creates a weird dichotomy where World Rugby has to defend them, but then sometimes World Rugby sells them out. So I've always thought that referees need to be reviewed, and the reviews need to be published perhaps on a scale maybe not like, minutia, and the rankings of the refs be arranged into tiers, like bands, first band, second band, third band. And so you know that on the tough, big matches, like a derby between the Sharks and the Bulls, you get the best refs. And then you come down to, a team, two teams that aren't that important. I think the error rate will also be demystified. And so I have a wish list. My wish list is that referees become A, less famous, B, therefore more protected, C, more accountable, and D, that we understand what the proper error rate is for the material decisions made in a rugby match. Instead of doing what we do now, which is cherry pick the very worst decisions they made and go, aha, look at that. And also on that line, why are we not using these touch refs that run along the sidelines and then they barely get involved in some kind of dialogue, the TMO being more important than them, instead of them being involved in judging offsides, them helping on scrum calls. Every other major sport besides football seems to be able to work them in more. And on the job they're supposed to do, touch judges, no one ever believes what they've done. Like, no one trusts the touch judge on where they say the ball went out. Nobody does. The player doesn't. The TMO never does. They go straight to the TMO. They don't consult the touch judge again. He's running along there trying to see. The players never trust it. You have every 10 screaming at them, saying, I kicked it more. The refs don't really trust them. They overrule them all the time. I don't think the touch judges trust themselves. And it's funny because the whole sport depends on precision. Like, whether you kick it out at the 7 versus the 5 has a 80% bearing on whether you score a maul try, because mauls are all 4 meters or less. So then we fool ourselves. I don't know why we don't have a chip in the bowl for test rugby. It just tells you where it is. Or we, again, just say it's not going to be precise, but we'll use you more. So those are some rambling referee wishes.
Well, I'm not done yet with the referees. You can ramble some
Go,
more.
do it.
The one question I'm asking is like this: the derbies, for example. Why use a local ref for a local derby? Because, when you grew up in Pretoria, no matter how impartial you think you are, you inevitably are not. I'm just saying as an example, even if it's not, something that you do willy-nilly or willingly, let me put it that. Why not use an Irish ref or Italian ref or somebody for a local derby? Even here, overseas, same thing. This weekend, we had a lot of derbies, Welsh teams and Scottish teams and everything else. Wouldn't that, take a lot of the sting out of it? Don't you think? I mean, this weekend about the Sharks and the Bulls, there was so much noise about the referee, and I mean, it's just ridiculous.
People lost their mind this weekend. There was the appearance of a propriety issue. So there's propriety and doing things properly, ethically, and the belief that all referees come to every match impartial, and it doesn't matter that they were born, 1 street away from Newlands. When they referee Western Province, they can do it properly if they're a good ref. There's that belief. We'll call that the ideal. But then there's the reality of you have to make 200 decisions and non-calls in a game. 5 or 6 of them usually turn the whole result, and one team's going to hate 3 of those that you made. And then it's convenient to go, see, you went to Bishops, so you favored the home team. Leaving aside that the coaches may have also been born and moved, and half the players who play against the Stormers now were born, let's just set that aside and set it aside that how difficult it is to approach a game in rugby and actually have an unfair mind. I mean, you literally are going to be reviewed by your boss in private, and they're going to look at every single decision you made. But let's just say that that's true, that in the end, you could have a subtle, unconscious bias in favor of the style of rugby that you came from and your boys, the vibe, whatever it is. And then obviously home crowd has an effect of 2 or 3 points. They've studied this. The answer is we should always be able to work that around. However, everyone, we have to have more referees then. So if you want to have more referees and therefore the ability to shift personnel across the map, you really cannot bash referees as much as we do, because it doesn't make it an attractive job to have. So we have to do 2 things at once. Be more gentle on players, refs, just people in general. And I can be an offender. I think I have sometimes been an offender on that this year. I've been too harsh, and I need to remember that. So, but also make them less famous in the sense that I don't think refs should have a social media profile. I think while you're a ref, you should have to relinquish that, just like some jobs you have to, and you should keep it really sober. And I think that the rules around the breakdown are too complicated, so that every single ruck could have a penalty against somebody, and you're having to decide which ones not to enforce. And all that is true, and you have, I think the referee job obviously has to be attractive to be held, but then I think make it more prestigious, whilst less famous, by ranking and having the elitism of like, I want to be in the top 5 of refs, so that drives me. I want to be top 50. I want to get top 100. Just like in a doctor or a lawyer, you want to get achievement. You want to have recognition. You want to be known as, Chambers recognized around the world as a lawyer. So in a way, demand more from them, but at least help them out a little bit on making the rules not so stupidly complicated around the ruck, and change it every 2 years so that the referee's life is complicated. How would you catch up right now if you were a low-level referee just making your way, and you're up against people that have had to adjust to 17 rules changes? I mean, they're so far ahead of you. I think we make a rod for our own backs, and we make referees' lives really miserable when we say we're going to make our game the most complicated game to referee, but then we're not going to let you defend yourself or explain yourself after the match.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work. One of my biggest items on the wish list would be the outsized role of the TMO. And I want to ask you this question. Soccer uses VAR. The ref runs off the field, watches for himself on a TV screen what happened, and then makes a decision. Isn't that maybe the way to go, rather than this to and fro and back and forth and up and down and replay and listening to what the crowd's shouting about or booing about? And isn't that maybe a better option?
Yeah. You've been around me enough now to know that I believe in finding fixed principles, like general principles, and then operating within those. And so in rugby, I like the constancy of the really big doctrines, the beliefs of rugby. And one of those is that the referee's in charge. Like, I think that the minute you start to bleed away from that, whether you give a TMO too much interventionism, you're chasing an idea you'll never get anyway, which is inerrancy. It's not going to happen. Even the TMO is going to make mistakes. You just keep including more humans into any process, whether it's a factory or a rugby match, you're going to include more margin for error. So the point more is the image of it, and does the public trust it? So it's more the integrity of it. And when we have a referee in charge, we know the referee will make some mistakes on a knock on he doesn't see, and we know that he will probably he'll miss some offsides. Okay, fine. But that's going to even out over 80 minutes. We hope. And some days it doesn't. But I think the promise of a TMO promises too much, and it's an illusion. And all it's doing is wrapping us into we're not allowed to be happy when someone scores a try. Somebody scores a try now, and there's anyone in the picture close or any kind of raggedness in the lead up, we go, I'm not sure. Don't drink your beer. Don't high five. We're all going to sit here in suspense. Is that the best way to build entertainment value in a sport that's fighting in the larger portfolio? No, you should probably be able to, get up and go crazy when you score a try. And the rare exception would be that it gets wiped off. And right now, I think we're not even able to celebrate. So that's gone wrong. I think also the intervention of TMOs for things other than foul play in the middle of a match, I think it's too much. I think it's difficult to compare the TV watching with in stadium. So when that's too different from each other, that's weird. It doesn't work on the grassroots. You're not going to do that on like a school rugby match. So you're making everything too different from each other. And I think rugby's one big principle also is that rugby is rugby, and that we are comfortable that there's going to be some loose ends, a few things we miss, and that's just fine. And if you don't like it, if you're Bulls fans, there was a way for you to play a match against the Sharks where the referee was out of the picture. Like, the game was there for you. You just do it. You make your kicks. You take your 5-meter lineouts and you ram it out. So that's like boxing. Don't leave the decision in the hands of the judges. But I think we get too complicated when we make too many decision makers. So I would have more input and help by the touch judges, but I'd always make the referee the final arbiter and do his best, do her best, and we live with it.
Yeah, and also I think the big screen thing in the stadiums is a bad thing, because it sort of creates the wrong hype, and it gets booed up quite literally sometimes. It takes control away from the ref, like you said. Anyway, sorry.
Another big principle about criticism of refs, though, I'll just touch on this. Mac Hansen for Connacht was in a press conference, and he kind of took over from his coach. I don't know if the coach realized he was going to go on this much of a rant, but he started using relationship killing words like always and never. Like in any relationship, you're not supposed to use always and never. You never say you're thankful. You always late, whatever. It just makes us fight. They're almost never true. So he started saying that. And before we jump beyond that, let's say what that is. That is bringing the game disrepute, because Mac Hansen was claiming that the ERC or the panel of judges or referees large have a bias in favor of Leinster against the other provinces in Ireland. Now, that is a thing that people believe in Ireland. It is very much an article of faith. But it cannot be true what Mac Hansen said, that they never get the call and that Leinster always gets the call. That's clearly not true. And so it's dishonest. And it's also going farther than Rassi ever went. It's going more along the lines of where I think Eddie Jones one time said, we were robbed and 16 players against us. That's destructive. Like, you're actually making the whole game cynical. You're saying that we didn't really have a fair shot. And so it's interesting to see what rugby does. For me, the most destructive things when a coach or player talks about a referee isn't the length of what they say or the medium they use, or whether it's a video or not, or whether it's cherry-picked or not. It's always impugning the motive of the referee. Just like if you were in an argument with someone in your family. It's not how long they talk about what you did wrong. It's whether they impugn your motives. You're a liar. You're a cheat. You're no good. That's the thing that I think rugby needs to be more clear about what it is they think is the sin. Is the sin that you say the referee made a mistake? I show you that he did, and it's clear. Why is that wrong? I mean, maybe it's cheeky, maybe it's arrogant, maybe it's bullying even, but it's not impugning the motives of the ref. It's just saying, look, they got those wrong. I think anytime we get on there and say the fix was in, we was robbed, we do ourselves a disservice because we make everything cheap. When we do win the cup, then it's subject to doubt as well. So if you got suffered by the bias, then did you benefit from it? Like, at some point you're making your own game stink.
Let's talk about numbers. That's the last item on our wish list. And the first item on the wish list is going to be something that you created, and that seems to be building up ahead of steam a bit, and that's the Harris Index. This morning when I saw the Harris Index and I saw the Bulls fell out of the top 10, I was distraught. So it just shows you the kind of impact that it's having. What's your wish list for the Harris Index?
I want the Harris Index to become the gold standard for intra-league, cross-league, top 10, top 15 clubs. I want the quirkiness of the Harry Index to be embraced. The fact that it sometimes is top 10, sometimes it's top 12, sometimes it's top 15. The fact that sometimes it's printed in color and it's in perfect font, and sometimes it's calligraphized on my lap as I'm flying. I want people to trust that it's all been factored in, and that what we're looking at is the true power balance, and that the Harry Index acknowledges sometimes that teams are picked that are substandard. It's more of a reflection of, if we really had everyone here and everyone's ready to go for the biggest matches, who would win? So even if sometimes the Lions do well for a while, they're never going to get to the top there, because you're never going to imagine them winning the big knockout matches. So it's a bit in favor of the big, tough, powerful, packed teams. I get that. But it's an attempt to have us look at it and say, okay, that's close enough. I will say this is one of the toughest seasons so far, because teams are really up and down. I mean, I've been really surprised by Premiership results. And it does look like to me that the French teams are pretty strong, but they're all cannibalizing each other. So it's difficult to see, who's going to go up. But yeah, I do love every weekend feeling like I have to do another Harry Index. It's
we're watching out for it. I mean, just give me the tagline again. Infallibly objective. What was it again?
It changes every week. I think this week it was incessantly objective but chronically subjective, or something like that. A lot of times I use words like infallibly objective or infallibly subjective and curiously objective, but I always play off those two. The other big pet peeve I want to throw about is, because I think this is also something for the refs to get rid of and not have to worry about, is the idea of the intentional knock-on attacks.
Yeah.
I don't know of any other thing in the sport or other sports that is akin to this. It's so ridiculous. At the same time, you're divining motives. You're having to judge whether someone's hand is going this way or that way. I think it's just knock-on. A knock-on's a knock-on. And, the advantage is built in. And if you don't want the ball to be knocked on, then throw it over or kick around. And so it's just, to me, it's good defense that you're getting in the way. And I think every time we try to tweak something, we go too far. And I think it's a very unpopular rule too. I think you look at fans at large, and there's that one, and the held up, where the held up becomes a dropout instead of a 5-meter scrum. It's so wrong-headed. A 5-meter scrum is a good reward for being held up. You tried, you reload, but you shouldn't let the defense get off the hook on that one.
On that subject, where you talked about, funny things, the thing about the new 20-minute red card, that's also sort of I don't know what the English word is for it, but it's not a good thing. It's not a blessing in disguise. It's the opposite of it. It's sort of it's leading to, you mentioned to me before, people would start evening things out. What would have been a yellow is now a red 20 minutes, and the other way around. And just talk to me about that. What's your wish list there?
Yeah, you've been in law enforcement in your life before. So, you know that when you're enforcing the law, you have a menu of choices. Some guy's taking a leak outside a club. Maybe it's in public. You're going to decide how to charge him, Is it public intoxication? Is it public indecency? Is it whatever? There's you have a menu of choices. Even when someone dies, you have, different countries have different rules for it, but there's homicide, manslaughter, involuntary, voluntary, premeditated, and there's all kinds of stuff. One thing is for sure in life is that when you invent a new category of charge, it will be used. It's like I'm inventing a new punishment, and then I'm a policeman, I'm not going to use it. I go, what if I do that one? Yeah, let's see what that looks like. So when you come in with a play on, penalty, sent off, that's how we lived for a long time, 100 years. It was obvious that being sent off was all about gouging, tripping, punching. And even then, you got a free punch, it's like, don't punch again. But whatever, it was a big thing. So it wasn't overused. And then you had the advent of a card system. And we had a split between a yellow and a red. It had its own logic, and it worked, but it was probably, we were using cards by refs as a way to get out of a concussion lawsuit. So it got overcarded for a while. We solved the problem. We attempt to solve the problem now by introducing another card. But to make it even more confusing, we call it red when it's not red. It's orange, or it's a baby red, or it's red 20, but it's orange. And so we shouldn't be surprised that what happened was something that cannot be proved, but I know is true, which is what happened was the cards that would have been yellow became orange, and cards that would have been red became orange. And that became, by default, the 40%, 50% choice. And so we shouldn't have been surprised by that, because what were you expecting? You gave referees this other card, and they found a way to use it. So you looked at the end of year tours, and that became a very popular card. And so I think we should be done with that. Let's return to something that, it's not the way we had it for 100 years, but at least it's something that we became used to. We generally thought we knew what a yellow was, and we generally thought we knew what a red was. Let the red have intent, let the yellow have danger, but not intent. And a rugby play gone wrong is yellow, and a thing that's not really a rugby play is red. I think that was simple, and my wish list is we return to that.
Right. We talked about a lot of things now. If you had one wish to be granted this year, in any aspect of the game, anywhere in the world, doesn't matter what would it be? The biggest wish for the year?
That we all genuflect and acknowledge and profess and declare to the heavens that the GOAT of rugby is Peter Steph Toy. And we stop all this foolishness about other people, little guys playing around in other places. It's Peter Steph.
Well, it's going to be Peter Steph at the end of his career, just sort of, carrying our own theme through. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. It's actually interesting. In every sport that I've ever been around, let's take tennis, for example, because clearly Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, and Novak Djokovic are among the greatest players to play tennis. And let's say 3 of the top 5, and they're 3 all playing at the same time. So it's bizarre because there's only one GOAT of a sport. And here we have 3 players, and it's really difficult to split them. I think the whole idea of a GOAT is wrong. And I think, certainly in rugby, a tight forward, a loose forward, and a back. We could even split the backs into the generals and the whatever, but maybe just the backs. And there's always these 3 categories, and it's impossible. So I'm being tongue-in-cheek. But if there is a player playing right now in our time that I think will 30 years from now be looked back on as the greatest of generation, which I think is a fair thing to discuss, greatest forward of his generation, greatest loose forward, Peter Steph du Toit.
No, I agree with you. Absolutely. No. And I have to give you kudos. I never gave you any warning because the question just popped into my head. So well done on that one. Good save. Well done. Anyway, that was fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, we could talk for another hour. We just spent about an hour on this as well. So I enjoyed that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
The biggest wish list is that the Megafoon and Lekker Rugby Pod become the gold standard as well of this medium that we do. Mm-hmm. So good luck to you.
I think we're on the way. We should get South Africans back in the houses, off the beaches. That'll help.
Come back.
Come back. All right, anyway, enjoy your mountains and don't do anything I wouldn't do. That wouldn't be much, though. I mean, I would probably fall off a cliff or something, but be careful.
Pretty much every day I do everything that you wouldn't do. So
yeah, that's the absolute truth, I tell you.
All right. Cheers, man.
Thanks, man.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Welman.